Hi everyone. In the next videos, we'll deal with user authentication for our database. And user authentication just basically means that we will add a login and register functionality to our application. And I say videos because I think as this is a little bit more work, as we'll not be using Passport, which is a very popular Node.js package to handle the user authentication. Instead, we'll be just developing it from scratch without using any special packages here. Therefore, I think I will just split this whole process into a couple of different videos, as I already saw that the previous video that I have just recently edited was already over 1 hour, and I would like to ideally keep it roughly around 30 minutes. Therefore, I think I will split the work into multiple videos. And we'll start in this video with basically adding the user registration functionality so that our user just can sign up. So technically what that means for us, we'll just create a registration form, and then we'll just add a registration support on the backend for this form. So we'll create form validation, we will adjust our database model, and then we will finish this off with the things that we need to do on the backend to handle it properly. Okay, so let's get started. So first off, you can start at many places. Let's maybe start with a DDL script. So let's just call it users.ddl. Obviously not users.ddl, but users.sql. And here, let's drop table if exists, and let's call it users. Let's create table users. Oops. And then let's say that a user will have an ID, which will be a varchar, and which will be a primary key. User will also have a username. This was supposed to be ID. Username. Username will be a varchar, and it has to be not null. And then user will also have a password. This will be a hashed password. So you never want to store the real password in the database. You always store a hashed password, but we'll get to that when we will be actually creating an insert to this table. And then, as always, I just like to do timestamp not null, and then default no. I just like to do a column which says when a row has been added. Okay, so these are our users.sql. What we need to do next is we need to go to our routes, and I suggest that we create a new file here, and let's call it users.js. In this users.js file, we'll need to do actually many things. Let me start with Express. Let's require Express. And from Express, we actually need, oops, I messed something up here. And from Express, we actually need a router. Express.router. Okay, because we are obviously, we'll obviously create new router. Okay, now what we need to do? We need to do register get route. That will of course take a request response, and the get route here an arrow function, and then it will basically return rest.render, and will render a view that we'll call register. Okay, for now that's it, and we need also a router.post. Also will be /register. And it will also take a request response, and now it will do some more things. We'll do that later. Okay, let's not copy this because we will also need this later on for the login. For now, we'll keep the logins. Oops, see daisies. Login. Okay, for now I will keep it as it is and not do anything here. Okay, first step done. Next step is in the views, we need to set up new file, and I would call it register.ejs. And that's it. And now we need to make a small refactor. So basically what's happening here, right, is in the index.js file, we have all these information that we have here. And we don't really want to repeat this information in our register file, and we would need to do that currently. This is not what you want to do. Luckily, the EJS has a nice functionality called layouts, which basically allows us to define a layout. So allows us to define something or a piece of HTML that all our views will share, and we will just in the layout then include different pieces. So it's like building the final HTML file out of different pieces, and there's also support for something called partials. So if we, for example, wanted to do something like a I don't know, a navbar, right, that we'll eventually have to do, we could just place it like in a partial, and then it would be in a separate file, and we could just include it or not when we want to do so. And this is super cool. Let's now set it up. It takes a little bit of setup. Among other things, in the views, we need to create a new file, which will be called layout.js. And in the layout.js, what we'll do is I will for now copy the whole index here. We will remove everything that is inside the body. And what we will do, we'll just say dash body. And then inside here, the layout, so the EJS layout, here will be included. Here other files will be included, right? So for example, instead of this body, everything that we'll have in the index.ejs file will be included. And from the index.ejs, we can now remove everything that went to the layout, and that's pretty cool. We now have a little bit fewer tabs here. So the same goes for the register view, but currently it would not happen because we need to add some of our imports right here. So first off, we need to install something. So we need to do, we need to go to the application, and we need to say npmi Express EJS layouts. Okay, it's been installed, so we can now do const express layouts require express EJS layouts. Okay, and now we can set that up. So what we need to do is we need to do app.set. We want to set layout, not payout, but layout. And this layout will have a value of layout because our file is called layout. Okay, and we also want to use express.layouts. Okay, let's maybe currently check if what we changed work. But before we do so, let's go quickly to the layout. Here we need to add a slash, as now we added the layout. So now basically this will not longer be always the same file as, or it will be the same file, but now it needs to actually be a proper path. Okay, let's now currently check maybe if it works. So basically let's do I don't know, something here. Let's keep it maybe empty. Let's make sure that on the /user/register that we actually properly register the router. Okay, this should render the register. That's good. And let's actually say module.exports. Export the router. And now let's go to our app folder and let's go in here. Let's say const user router require /routes/user and app.use, and let's say /user, and here let's say user router. Okay, and we can say npm run start. Something went wrong. Okay, what went wrong? Can't find module/routes/ okay, it should be users. Once again. Okay, this time everything's fine, and I will just quickly open the application. So here we are in our to-dos. Let's say /user/register. And we have an empty file, which is to be expected, but let's inspect it and let's check out if we have all the head information. And that's it. We have it. Okay, so our layouts work. That's good. Let's maybe change finally the title to the app. Should see the title changed here. Okay, and let's try to put something here. And let's see if it renders, and it does. Okay, and you can already see that it has the styles applied, right? So it did not render here on the left top corner or top left corner, but it has rendered nicely in the middle because of the styles and that we have applied. Okay, that's good. Let's currently start with the HTML for the registration form. So I suggest we do that with a div which will have a class of card, so that it will be just a nice card in the middle. And inside this div, we want to have a few things. I would say that we need something like a kind of a header, which will just say register. And then we also need a form. So inside this form, we need to have, I would say, let's divide maybe all the inputs into groups, right? So we'll have an input group, and inside this we'll have an input that will be of a type text. We'll have a name of username, and we'll have an ID of username. Okay, and above this, let's define a label for, and let's say username. Okay, let's copy this. And here, I copied slightly too much, I think. And here, let's say instead of username, let's say password. And of course, we need to add here a label, username, and here, let's say password. And here, let's copy this once again, and let's say repeat password. Repeat password, if I could only spell. Okay, and let's now also here, let's say repeat password. Okay, that's cool. So the form is ready. Maybe we can, or it's not ready yet. Obviously, we need a submit button. So button, and we'll say maybe register. And by default, it's like a button inside the form, so it's a submit button. And maybe what we could also say is above here, so below here, something like already have an account, sign in here, and then we make this sign in here into a link like this. Not like this, but like this, and then we make an href here to a route that yet doesn't exist, but hopefully will slash user slash login, right? So that if somebody has already an account, they can just go to the login route. Okay, that's good. Let's maybe save it. Let's check how it looks. Yeah, not so good, not so nice. So let's maybe currently add some styling to it. So to add some styles, we obviously go to our good old public folder into the styles.css, and let's maybe somewhere here we had our form, if I'm not mistaken. Exactly, my form. Okay, so the reason I'm looking for this is because I'm looking for like a place where I would like to have all the styles related to a form near each other, right? So that I don't have like my style related to form here and then somewhere here and then somewhere at the bottom, right? So here, for example, you can see that we have all the buttons like close to each other, and that's what we should stick to. So now let's maybe start from the outside. I would like to, instead of using the flex here to style the form, I would like to this time use something else. Therefore, I will just create this register login form, because I have a feeling that we'll reuse this styling for the login form later on. And usually it is like this, that the register and login forms are pretty similar to each other. Okay, so now we want to say display grid. Display grid. I think I mentioned that I like grid to style the register and login forms. Okay, row gap. I like some row gap, and then that's it. We obviously need to now apply this form. So let's go here and let's go here. We'll have say class, and of course here we need action. Action will be to go to stress register, and method will be post. Okay, so now if I refresh, you can already see we have got some changes. Some row gap was added. Already looks a little bit better. But let's not stop our work right now. What we need to do is, what I like to have is, usually I like to have them, so the username or the label is on top of the input, the password is on top, and then here repeat password is already on top because it's too wide to fit into one line. So the flex is working good here, but let's change it slightly. Okay, so let's go here and let's say, for example, that we'll have like a form group, and the form group will be applied to a label and to an input. So to an input and to the label for this input. And this actually will have a display of flex, and this will have a flex direction of column. Let's copy this, let's apply it to our divs here. So this will have a class of form group, and let's copy this part, let's apply it right here, and right here. Okay, let's save it. And it looks already much better. Okay. So for my liking, the username, password, and repeat password are slightly too big. So let's also make a change. This time let's start from here maybe. Let's give them a class of form label. So here we'll give a class of form label, here we'll give a class of form label, and here also. Okay, that's good. Let's go back to our styles, and let's here define a style which will say form label. And the form label, we want the font size to be small. Let's save, refresh here, already much better. And then we want the color to be I have already a color here on the side prepared. I think something like 63 would look good. And so this is like the grayish color. I think that's pretty good. Okay, now let's maybe try to style the text inputs here a little bit, because I also like them to be a little bit different. Why not? So let's say dot text input, and by the way, you can select the text inputs here much better, or not much better maybe, but in a different way. I could also say like input where type equals text or something like this, but actually we'll now in a second change these types to not to text but to passwords, therefore then it would not work. So I just like to just add a class here, and then I'll add it to the inputs. I think that's valid. I'll actually add the class right away so that we can make, we can see the changes. All inputs are here, and then they have a class of text input. Class text input, and here also there's a class of text input. Getting slightly long, but somehow we'll manage. And here, as I mentioned, let's change the type to a password. What it will do is now, if I don't refresh it, you can see the letters that I'm typing, right? And when I refresh it, you can't see them anymore. That's just a little bit safer for the passwords. And I wanted to end up here. Okay. So first off, I think that we need some border radius. Let's say 0.25 rem. I think that's what we did for our buttons. Exactly. Okay, they rounded that a little bit. I like to height. Let's make the height a little bit bigger, 1.5 rem. And now the border has become a little bit too much, so I would say 1 pix. And then let's copy this color and then say solid. And that should make our border a little bit less bold, and it already made our lines a little bit higher. This is thanks to the height attribute. And then I would also like to say a font weight, and I like it to be bold. And maybe let's add some margin on top, but very small, 1 pixel maybe. Okay, that looks good. That looks good. Okay, this is our register. This is our register form. What we still have to style is we need to style our register here header, and we need to style our button. So actually, what our button can do, I think, is our button can just let's go here. Can just be class button add, or it can be button and then button add. And this will be this nice blue. We already have the styles for this button defined, so let's just reuse it. One thing I would change slightly is I would make it a little bit, I will give it a little bit more height. So let's go to styles. Let's go down here, because here we have our button. Let's say button add, or no, button add we already have, button submit. And with the button submit, let's say height 1.5 rem. Okay, that's good. Let's save. Let's see if it. Oops. Let's save. Let's see if it has been applied. Not really, because we need to apply the class. That makes a lot of sense. Okay, let's now refresh here, and it's a little bit wider. Okay, that's good. And let's maybe actually we have made this nice text, and I would also like this label text, the form label, to be applied right here, class form label, and I deleted the closing. Oopsie daisies. Okay, and it's already nice. One thing you've seen is that it actually shrinked when I lowered the font size here. I actually don't like that, because we'll be doing some form validations and we'll be displaying some errors, and we don't want now the register form to have a certain width, and then when we add here a longer error, it will just increase in size. So let's go to our styles, and let's set here on the register login form, I will set a width, which is 300 pixels. So this will be a set width, which we'll have. Later on, we'll just work on a media query, which if it's smaller than 300, it will just take the whole screen. So it will just scale down. Okay, but that's it for the styling of our register form. Let's currently go to our backend, and let's do some backend engineering on our users routes. So to handle the registration form on the backend of our application, we need to first start with the so-called client-side form validation. So this is where we'll check all the inputs. We'll check if the user has provided the values that we accept and that we find valid. Okay, to do so, let's start with initiating an object where we'll hold all the errors. So this object will have keys named after the names of the fields in the registration form. And we will add here as values to these keys the error messages, if of course this is necessary, right? So if we detect that a username or a password are not how we wanted them to be, we'll just add some error messages to this object, and then it will display them to the user using the EJS templates. So first off, let's check if the password that a user has provided is not too short. So in order to do that, let's check, let's say the request body.password. This is how we get the password from the form. This is parsed using our body parser. And here, let's use an environment variable. Let's call it minimum password length. And let's create this macro variable also. So to do that, we go to our let's maybe copy the name. We go to our env file and we say minimum password length equals 8. Okay, let's go back to the register routes. And if this is true, what we want to do is we want to say form errors dot password equals password must be at least. And now we use once again this macro variable. Here it will render for us a number, characters long. Okay, that's very good. Now Control Alt arrow down, and we copy it. And let's now do the same thing for username. Here dot trim. We could think if this does not make sense to create a function basically which does this for us. So basically a function that would take these attributes and then it would take these arguments and then it would create this kind of error for us. But for now, I think that's also good. And here just say min username length. Let's also create this environment variable. Let's set it, let's say to 6. So like 6 should be sufficient for username. For a password, if you don't store any sensitive information, 8 should be sufficient. If you do store, then you want to have a more complex password validation. You want to enforce your users to also use something like some numbers, some special characters. And then it gets a little bit more complex as you have to validate the password, most likely with some kind of regular expression. But for us, it's completely sufficient if we just require a certain length. Okay, and now the most, or not very hard, but the most complex one, the most complex check is we actually want to check if we already have a user in our database that has the given name. And we already see Visual Studio Code has imported the client for us. That's very good. And we want to here select ID from users, where username equals $1. And the $1, of course, as bind variable will become our request.body.username.trim. So here we trim the username because we want to remove the leading and trailing spaces. So just so that the username does not have any spaces, we'll trim it also when we insert the username to the database. So we also trim it right here. Okay, and now if response user.rowCount is higher than 0, what we want to do is we want to say form errors dot username is equal to username or user with this username already exists. Okay, so now if we have an error here or here, and I now see that we have forgot about one check that we wanted to do. We also have the repeat password, if you remember. So we have the password and the repeat password. Repeat password. And we also have, and this will be not equal to request.body.password. Okay, and if this is not fulfilled, then we want to add an error message which says passwords must be equal. Okay, and here we want to add it to repeat password. Okay, that's good. So now if either request.body. Not request, sorry, form errors.password or exists, or form errors.username, or I think we actually can make it a little bit smarter, or maybe let's do it like this, form errors or for errors. You could basically get a list of keys and then check if it's longer than 0. But it can also work like this. Repeat password, or maybe let's actually change it to the keys so that after if we then afterwards add something, then it also works here for us. So basically the way you do it is to say object.keys, and here you give an object form errors, and then you say it returns an array. So let's say .length, and if the length is bigger than 0, then we want to do not form errors. We want to actually render We want to return response.render. We want to render the register template, and we want to use the form errors object. Actually, the same thing we want to do in the get, but here we want to have it empty. Okay, that's it for our server-side form validation. Let's now move to HTML. In the HTML, let's start with some housekeeping. Let's move that to new lines. Here, right here. And let's move this to a new line. And here we want to make an if statement. This is how you make an if statement. Basically, you can use an extension with EJS code snippets, and then you just write a bigger than sign, and then it shows you the code snippet list, or you can just write it yourself. So here, if we have form errors.username, because we are in the username input, what we want to do is we want to add a class, and the class, let's call it text input error. And what we want to do is we want to generate another if statement, actually the same condition, username. Here, if this is true, you want to generate a small tag with double L. And here what we want to say is we want to render form errors.username. So we want to render the error message. Okay, so here if we just copy this part, we'll need to do the same thing down here. So let's move all of this to new lines, including this part, and then we paste it instead of this. And let's do the same thing right here. That's good. And the last thing to do is we should probably apply a class here. Let's call the class maybe text or form error text, because this is a text of our form error. I'll copy this part, and then let's apply it also here, and let's apply it also here. Okay, and now here I messed something up. So this is the small, and this is this. Okay. And now, so now we have this. Let's move to our styles.css to style this a little bit. So here, text input, let's create the classes here. Basically, what we want to have is we want to have a form error text, and we want the text to have a font size of small, and we want the color to be an RGB 190.00. This is a nice red. And then we want to make the border of the input element also red. So text input error, and here we say a border 1 pixel. We also use the RGB 190.00, and then here we say solid. Okay, that's it. Let's now open our application. Let's see how it all looks like. So here to start application, let's say npm run dev start. Here we have our application running, but let's go to user/user/register. Okay, let's insert maybe incorrect input. Okay, we see no errors. And this is because here we didn't change it. So here it needs to be a password. I was slightly too fast copying, and here it was repeat password. Let's check the back end once again, what we have here, and exactly here we also have to change it to a username. Here we have password, username, repeat password, username. That's good also. Okay, let's see now how it works. Here I messed something up now. Here we are missing this. Okay, let's test it now. Okay, but we should have gotten a little bit more errors. Let's see why we get so little. And the reason is because here what we need to be checking for is the length of our strings. So here length. Okay, and now let's try to put something that's incorrect. And we now have the error message here, although here we have an error message for a password, while it should be a username. And here minimum username length. I was slightly too quick copying it. Okay, let's refresh it once again. Let's try it once again. Okay, so now the username must be at least 6 characters long, password must be at least 8 characters long, and passwords must be equal. Okay, let's maybe try to now insert also equal password. So here t register. Oh, here we have still the error that we should not have. Let's check maybe why. And the reason is here we have a repeat underscore password. That's how the HTML form, so the input is the name of the input. So I fixed it. I will save it now. Let's here refresh it and let's say TTT. And currently we don't have this error anymore. Okay, but for now, what we have implemented here in our routes is only the case where something goes wrong. So currently, let's make a comment here. Form is validated here. And let's actually implement the way where it actually goes right. So where we have validated all the inputs, our user has provided the good username, correct password, correct password once again. And now we want to create the user. Okay, so let's initialize a response. We'll go to the database. And what we'll do now is we'll create something called a hashed password. And a hash password is because you never want to store the actual password. You only store a hash. So basically, hash password is just a hexadecimal string that represents the value that the user has inputted as password. And the reason you don't store the real password is if it somehow gets stolen, then they will only have the hash of the password, and the hash of the password without the actual hashing way. Knowing the actual hashing way is not very useful, but even if somebody knew how it was hashed, then hashing transformation is only a one-way transformation. It cannot be reverted. This is why you only and always store only the password hash. This is why also most websites do not have a way so that they just, when you forget a password, they send you your password to your email, but they always make you reset it. So you have to set a new one. And this is because they really don't have and they don't know this password. They just know the password hash. Okay, so let's here start a hashed password. We'll use something called bcrypt to do it. So let's say const bcrypt equals require bcrypt, and here say require. App has crashed. Let's install bcrypt, npm in bcrypt, and here we say await bcrypt.hash, and here we say request the body password, and here will be the salt, so something you would concatenate with the input before hashing or the number of times it should be hashed. In our case, I just select 10. And here, let's also take the UUID. We'll use this to create a user ID. So here, const hashed password. And then let's say const user ID equals UUID v4. That's good. And now let's start a try catch block. In this try catch, we want to set the response equal to client.query. And in this query, we want to insert into users ID, username, password. When you insert, it's good practice to write the column list and then the values $1, $2, $3. Here we want to pass our user ID. We want to pass our request.body.username.trim. We want to once again trim the username and our hashed password. So that's good. In case we have an error, we want to display it. And we want to redirect the user once again to our /user/register route. Okay, that's it. And if everything goes right, what we want to do is we want to redirect our user to /user/login route. Okay, that's good. Let's currently check if this works. So I will refresh it here, and let's very quickly, I need to start application, npm run dev start. And let's maybe create a user. Let's call it test, and let's use the same password and repeat password. Let's register. Okay, RQ is not defined. We have an error here, routes 44. Oops, I'm not here. Routes 44. Here should be request. Okay, let's do it once again. Test, register. Once again, something is wrong. And this is a... Okay, here, our login route currently is trying to render something that's not very correct. Let's make it render the login. And here in the login, let's maybe just say login so that we know that it has redirected us properly. But we can already say basically that our request was redirected. If we go in here, we can see that for our request to be redirected to the login route right here, everything needs to go right. Therefore, our user, if we currently take a short look in the database, should already be created. Let's just start from users, and we can see our user here. Okay, that's it. That's it for now. I would like to thank you all for watching. Let's maybe not finish with this not very nice error message. Let's go to our register route. Okay, I'd like to thank you all for watching for today. We have created a user registration form. We have created a backend for this form, and we have created a user validation. We have also created or extended our database model. In the next episode, we will take a look at the login functionality. So we'll design the login form, we'll design the backend for the form, and then we'll design or create a session authorization or authentication. But this will come in the next episode. For now, thank you all for watching and see you in the next episode.